Board of Selectmen's meeting for March 24, 2015. It's our first spring meeting. Well, I guess we met last night at the special town meeting, so it's our second spring meeting. We announced at the beginning of every meeting that the meeting is being recorded. And we also want to start with a moment of appreciation for our servicemen and women serving around the world. Thank you very much. And we're pleased tonight to have our legislative delegation here, Senator Timilty, Representative Denise Garlick, and Representative Sean Dooley. Did you guys want to start with some sort of report from the state to let us know how we're doing? Or
be happy to join you this evening.
Thank you so much for coming.
My colleagues, we've got a great delegation, partners in everything that relates to the great town of Medfield, and it's early yet in the budgetary process, because I think that's what matters the most in this case, in particular, what we're going to do with the general appropriation and how that relates to local aid, Chapter 70, Chapter 90, to the town of Medfield. What we can, we know you send a lot in on April 15th, and we do our best to try to return. It's not an even. The scales are not even by any means, but we certainly attempt to do our best. And it looks as though all signals are pointing to, unless my colleagues have heard different, that what the governor has proposed, unless something drastic happens, that that we would be pretty close to that number. And it's premature. I think we'll potentially, as we've done in the past, do some joint resolution to give you some certainty before town meeting about what you're going to get. But we haven't heard that it was, or at least myself on the Senate side, and we go in May, has not been that the governor's number is way off. There are some things that have to happen, because he unfortunately inherited a budget deficit when he came in, whether it's $750 million or his number more like 1.75 billion, excuse me, with a B. And he has made some efforts to do different things to kind of close that gap before July, one of which is an early retirement plan, which appears to be moving along. That's $178 million that could be realized before the July budget. So a lot of moving pieces, and a lot of things are in flux at this point. But that's our singular focus. I think that the House will be, and my House colleagues can talk about it more, will be doing that third week in April or so, or fourth week in April. And I think the delay, what happened was, one, the new governor, so House 1 comes out a little bit later. Consensus revenue hearing was in January, a little bit later than December, which normally would happen. So that's where we are. But as I say, our singular focus is to make certain that we're delivering for you. And it appears that the number that the governor has suggested will be that. He also added a little more to Chapter 90, which I think was $197,000 extra that you can plan after this very difficult winter. That's certainly something that's going to help. And my colleagues want to jump in about anything more, feel free. I don't want to take too much time.
No, I was going to say, I mean, I'm on Ways and Means, and I know we just pulled out the early retirement today, and so we'll be probably taking that up in session tomorrow. As far as Chairman Dempsey and everyone else that I've talked to, on Ways and Means and in our House caucus meetings, agree with Senator Timilty that the House is going to do everything it can to match the governor's number for local aid and have that be a focus. So obviously during the budget cycle there will be the earmark battle, and the cities will do their thing, trying to get more of a lion's share, and that will be that will remain to be the budget the budget battle. But as far as the Speaker and the Chairman of Ways and Means, that they agree with Senator Timilty in so much that we're going to try to stay course as much as possible, because it is a difficult budget cycle. That the $700 million for this year and the $1.8 billion for next year is it's going to be a painful budget process. So we'll do everything that we can to mitigate that, but I think the governor has been very clear that he wants to make sure that local aid and the local schools are put first and foremost, and let's see where else we can cut and tighten up everywhere else.
Thank you. We brought just a brief handout for you which summarizes what Senator Timilty and Representative Dooley just said, And it looks at the money that Medfield got for Chapter 70, for the local aid, for the special ed circuit breaker. I know that Medfield has recently received, quote unquote, the pothole money, and that has been allocated based on a formula. We also was released by the state administration $100 million at the beginning of January on Chapter 90. Tomorrow, Representative Dooley and I are poised to vote on an additional release of $200 million of Chapter 90 money, which for Medfield will be $395,580. So the thought was to authorize this as quickly as possible, so as you're starting your construction season, you can count on that money coming forward. So, you know, I'm pleased. I think Senator Timilty, of course, is right on track that, you know, all focuses are on the budget presently. As we move into the legislative cycle, which has been a little slow off the blocks at the beginning of the new legislative season, I wanted to share with folks that I'm pleased that I was appointed the chairman of the Joint Committee on Elder Affairs. And I see that as a great partnership particularly with Medfield's strong commitment to their seniors in the community. And it allows my committee to speak about issues from housing, healthcare, transportation. And I would like to remind people here the stunning fact, there are presently 1.2 million seniors in the Commonwealth today. In the next 5 years, the population for the Commonwealth will increase by about 4.3% is the projection. The senior population will increase by 25%.
Yeah.
So, you know, good work to be done, and I'm pleased to be doing that. Also, just in the information we handed out, just as a reminder, is the extraordinary work that happened around the Medfield State Hospital, around the water tower, that real partnership with our delegation and the town. And it was, to me, just a stunning relationship. And I can never express enough my admiration for this administration, for your town administrator, for the Board of Selectmen, for your assistant town administrator, and the volunteers with just a myriad of talents and skills and unselfishness in the work that they did for making that possible for the town to buy that property.
Yeah.
It's a complicated process buying an old state hospital, it turns out.
Yeah, as it turns out, it's a complicated process.
than you expect.
Yeah. So with that, I'm sure we're open to any questions, Senator. Yes?
Yeah, well, and I highlighted a little bit before the meeting, but, you know, when we go into the budget process, we know Chapter 70 is so important. And I'd like to hope, you know, looking forward to working with the administration on different kinds of ideas, because last year we added $100 million into Chapter 70, which was a significant investment in the Commonwealth, and that's appropriate. Everybody agree with that. But $9 million right off the top went to one community up in Essex County, and then as you go through the usual other big cities, they took a lion's share of that money. So I know we're working. Our colleagues, I'm not on the committee, but working on the Foundation Budget Review Committee, and you know, there's anytime you touch Chapter 70, there's the danger that more will go to the cities. And I know there are challenges, and there certainly are, and they have much to deal with. But that's not to suggest that this town and towns like it shouldn't also get their share of that. And I know we try to do the $25 per student, but I think we have to do we have to do more. And I'm hopeful that the administration will be open to new ideas, or have some ideas of their own from their experiences, on a way that in a fair way, in a just way, that we can also see some of those resources that go, because it clearly didn't happen. You know, as I say, you know, 12 or 15 or 20 communities largely ate that up, and it's time that system is broken, and we really need to fix it. I mean, they based it off a snapshot in 1993, and it hasn't changed. And we know that the area has changed and grown, and it's time to really get that done. So I would hope.
Isn't that being examined now, Jim?
Yeah, the Foundation Budget Review Committee is doing it.
Yeah, okay.
They're going all around. They were at the Lee School in Dorchester just a couple of weeks ago, and you know, it's a broad spectrum of people who are on that, and I'd like to see some action, because the status quo just isn't satisfactory.
We appreciate, I think, all you guys do to try to
help us with the local aid. But it's interesting, over the past 40 years, while the aid has gone up dollar-wise, back in 1975, for example, this Mike had compiled, 27% of our budget was state aid. Even in 1989, it was 22%. Today, it's down to 12%.
Yeah, that's
So
amazing.
it's increasing, but we're under the gun because less and less of the total picture is coming from the state aid. And I think, Mike, you said from Chapter 70, which looked like we got, I think the governor said $20. I think we were currently getting 25, so I think we actually lose on that, don't we?
Last year was 25 per student.
And this year, they're proposing 20, so we actually losing a little bit on that.
And I saw in the press releases today that Jeff Beckwith, the executive director of the Mass Municipal Association, is suggesting that it should be $100 per student, and that he's saying the money's there because the state's getting something like 80 million out of the slots or parlor down in Plainfield, and that that money is earmarked, I guess, for local aid. So,
I mean, the realization of that, finally, might be important if that does go to local aid. That would be, it'd be something that, you know, a promise that was promised many years ago now finally is realized, and I hope that that thought is seriously entertained.
but Richard's point is a good one, that basically the trend over the years has been that the legislature has just generated less in taxes through the different revenues that the legislature has been seeking from the residents, and forced the towns to do more through the property taxes. And so that we're just picking up where the legislature has not given us the funds to do it, unfortunately.
And some of the cities that benefit do not do anything with the Prop 2.5, don't go to their levy. I don't believe Boston
Oh, they never
or
have to,
Cambridge
huh?
don't have to, and have
So it's just an unequal
tremendous amount
system,
in
yeah.
free cash. And you know, Cambridge gets a very good chunk of Chapter 70, and you know, they have, I think, maybe you have 25% of your population is in public school, and I think Cambridge is less than 10% of the population, and there is almost an endowment municipally the size of Harvard in their stabilization and free cash.
Yeah, you remind me that when my parents lived in Boston, and they were away, and so I was writing the checks, and I used to just laugh at the property tax bill from the city of Boston for a very nice house.
Yeah.
It was nothing.
Once you get the
And the other
residential
thing-
exemption, yeah.
Over the years, if you go way back, the federal government used to contribute. I mean, when you had with sewerage and stuff, way back, the federal government picked up a huge chunk. Now there's zero that comes out of the federal government. So unfortunately, it's the local town that keeps trying to plug along, and sometimes we're getting less and less on the percent. So I think you guys do a great job battling for us, and unfortunately, I think over the years, the percent, you know, has gone down for a variety of reasons.
Healthcare costs.
Yeah,
Healthcare,
That's
pensions.
the big one. Yeah.
Medicaid,
it takes
nursing homes.
everything right off, because we haven't missed benchmark by much over the past year, and obviously January the income tax is going to slide down from 5.2 to 5.15 because the economic triggers are hitting, but you know, we've been progressing, you know, in the manner which we expected, but we have this deficit because I think you take a look at it, the healthcare costs just eat up every dollar, and there's very little discretionary to put in different potholes. That's why I was hoping for a new and more creative way of governing, and I think the fact that the governor is a former selectman, I think that's going to be in the advantage of small towns, because the battle, as I'm sure my colleagues will attest, it's not Republican and Democrat by any means as it is in Washington. What the battle is, it's urban versus suburban. And we all have our issues, but Boston dominated the legislature for many years, and now the other cities, and if it doesn't go their way, they threaten a suit, and you hope that you can hold on to the 4-3 decision that we most recently got in the court case that Holyoke brought, but there's no guarantee either. And that could be even worse news should a case go forward before the SJC about Chapter 70 and school funding. If you lose that, it could be even worse. So it's not the spring is sprung, but we're not bringing the most rosy picture for you here today.
So one of my ideas about how to get more money to the towns is to have the auto excise tax, which we get the money from, have the values of the cars be more realistic. The values of the cars just, under the statute, just drop precipitously. No one would ever sell their car for the value that they're taxed on the auto excise tax. And if you just had more reasonable values set into that, the cities and towns would get a lot more money. I mean, we get $1.5 million, I think, a year from the auto excise, but if the values were real, I'm sure it would be double that. So that's just a sort of a creative way to, without, nobody likes to pay that tax, of course, but nobody likes to pay any tax.
But if it's fair, if there's a
Yeah.
if there's a justifiable element.
And it's slightly progressive because, the people that have the fancier cars pay a little bit more.
And I think that people would be more apt to consider something like that if, as I said, that kind of scale on April 15th that goes into Boston and how little comes out, that if they knew that it was something that they could capture and keep, and it would go to their services, they would actually see it, they'd be willing to do that. We've seen that with referendums before on the sales tax and others. The Commonwealth is willing to say, we'll keep a tax on us if we know it's coming here and we're actually getting it, it's going to services, it's not going somewhere else, and it's not being wasted.
Speaking of car taxes, I had a question about carbon tax that's being proposed. Seems to me, isn't that going to adversely affect the suburbs at the expense of the cities? Because the cities, there's a lot of mass transit use, and I understand it's 30 cents a gallon, up to 30 cents a gallon they're proposing as a carbon tax on the price of fuel. So, or there's talk about the number of miles you drive, there's going to be a tax.
The open road tolling. Both of those, Mike, have been floated over the last, open road tolling was throughout the whole Patrick administration, and the carbon tax through the Climate Change Committee has been talked about, and we can discuss that, but about the goal of working on the changes in our environment. But however, as it relates to really actually being voted on, I'm not certain that there's been that big a push in a reality that it would get to the floor, because that'd be a rather seismic change, and it would really impact.
It seems to me where you've got the very wealthy now, and I was, to a certain extent, they're poor living in Boston and Cambridge, but also the very wealthiest are living in Boston and Cambridge. And you're going to impose a carbon tax on many of the suburbs, have a lot of poor people, middle-income people, or low-income people.
They have to drive along, they have to drive to work too.
Drive long distances to get to jobs. They can't afford the housing in Boston or Cambridge. And you're going to put a big tax on their commute to work, and the people who get an 80% subsidy on mass transit are going to be exempted, because I'm sure there'll be no carbon tax on the fuel that the T buys.
Yeah. There's a certain amount of underlying institutional discrimination against towns like Medfield and Dover and Sherburne and Walpole, where immediately when you bring up that there are some needs, you get lost in the cries for what's happening in the larger cities. And that would be you're at a point where you could work to tax somebody out of being able to get to work. You're assessed by the T, you pay your share, a penny on your sales tax goes to the MBTA. And when you think of that, that's about $900 million, of which $250 to $300 million goes right out the door in debt service. And then that same agency found $300 million to do a superfluous train to Foxborough. Bought a line, put money into new trains, and are going to run a train that's an express train to people who are already largely served either on the Walpole or Norfolk line or the Attleboro-Providence line into Boston. And it's really distressing to see that a penny on your sales tax. If you lived in Springfield, I think you'd be very mad. They also have massive expansion into the Somerville and Somerville and Everett area, and also the South Coast Rail. And it's a cautionary tale, because then Treasurer Grossman, at a consensus revenue hearing in 2013, had done a very good presentation about the state's finances before the Ways and Means Committee, and then he did that extemporaneously, as I say, but then he went to a script just to mention how dangerous he thought it was at the time based on our bond rating and the fact that this was a $2 billion, which is the T's number, so double that. I'd call it $4 billion, which, because every one of their projects, Mike, you've been at it a long time, every one of their projects has not come in on time and on budget. In fact, it's been double. And I know that transportation planning is very important, and we should have that in the back of our minds, but we can only do that which we can pay for. So there's the way it ought to be, and then there's the way it is. And unfortunately, the Mass Department of Transportation, and you saw no better example than this winter about how poorly and inefficiently they run, but on their core system, but continue to expand because it's a good idea. And I think carbon tax and some other things are good ideas, but the reality of what we can do, a more measured approach would be smaller and incrementally. We've done wonders with water conservation over the last 30 years. We can do the same on carbon emissions, but it's not with a carbon tax. Not at this point.
Can I follow up a little
Sure.
bit, staying with that, because, and try to get some information from, maybe from you guys of what's going on. There's 3 issues dealing with the railway that I see. My understanding is that CSX has sold the Framingham to Foxborough line to the MBTA.
They have a purchase and sale that's been signed with a deposit.
So what does that mean? Do they have
I think
it or
they still have to be, the National Transportation Safety Board still has to sign off on it, and I believe the governor still has to, have a final sign off on it. So out of the 23 million, only 2.3 million has been given. Unless you've heard
No,
anything.
you're dead on.
So do you see that going through, or do you see that?
I know in my conversations with the governor is they're looking at any way they can to kill it.
So is that realistic, that?
I don't know. I mean, that was 3 weeks ago that I had the conversation, myself and Representative Rogers, and, and I know, Congressman Lynch and Congressman Kennedy are also both trying to delay it down at the National Transportation Safety Board, and they're not necessarily trying to kill it. They're just like, put the brakes on, hold this until we can figure out exactly what's going on. Don't approve it.
Because that brings up an interesting point. Then, right now, we're having an issue with the track crosses 109, trying to get them to repair. We're told we cannot repair in between the lines because that's the train's jurisdiction. It's full of potholes. The chief went down, took pictures. Anyone in a wheelchair, anyone in a baby cannot get across the sidewalks. The streets have all the potholes. And then we have our entire water line from a state hospital, water tower to the well number 6 is being held up because we can't get underneath. We were told we needed this flag man, and then it was held up with the winter. So my question is, who owns that for us to deal with? Is it the MBTA right now, or is it CSX? Who do we deal with right now? Who owns it?
I'd say
Is it
CSX
still
still open
CSX?
until it's completed. I mean,
So that's still CSX we have to deal with, which means they're probably not going to listen to us at all because they figure, we're out of here.
Yeah, and we've had some difficulties receiving communication back from them
Oh, they're terrible.
upon getting the complaints.
They're way
And
down to Florida.
And I think that as I said, a letter in the spirit of the laws that regard federal rail travel, and there should be some. They have an obligation to communicate much better, and at this point they have not. And I think that with all of the issues that are surrounding the potentials of increased freight traffic on that line, either state control or CSX's control, I think the delegation will commit to work with the congressional delegation, as Representative Dooley said, Congressman Lynch and Congressman Kennedy, to get them here in this community, because there have been too many. One is too much. The delays, because we're lucky that there wasn't loss of life based on an emergency happening when those when the crossing guard were down. Right. And I think that if the delegation will let me, I'll take the lead as the chair of public safety and the on the Joint Committee in the Senate, and bringing them here to you to answer some questions. So we have some certainty, and when an accident does happen, or when there is a malfunction or failure, that they have a plan with which to address that, or allow you to, and that they will, give us some reasonable certainty that someone's going to answer the phone, so we can get answers that we need about what future challenges are coming, and then they can promise us that what happened in the past won't happen again.
We have the Federal Rail Commission representatives coming out tomorrow at 11:30 to meet with us about the issue of our raising the gates without permission to let the traffic through on 109. Apparently I guess we're in violation of federal law by raising the gates.
That's 22.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what do? Do you let the traffic back up to 495 on 109 waiting for the CSX crew to arrive? Or do you raise the gates and break the federal law so that the traffic can move and you don't have road rage incidents out here?
Yeah. I think the reasonable person standard would suggest that you did the right thing, but government and bureaucracy is not altogether reasonable.
I think while we're all trying to read the tea leaves on what's going to happen with that rail line too, it's going to cost $23 million for the full purchase price of that line. It's going to be an additional $89 million to capitalize,
Yeah.
whatever they were going to have to do that. When we look at what's happening with the MBTA and the public and private statements the governor's making about suspending the sale, I think that we're all in a holding position here for probably quite a while.
How did this escape under the radar? I mean, it seemed like the whole deal was
It's like a secret, yeah.
under the
It was.
table, and
It was stunning.
Behind closed doors, none of us were told, no one in the communities were told. It was very, very old school, behind closed doors, smoke-filled back room.
at
deal,
which level?
Just everything that is
was
wrong
this-
with government.
Was
that's
this
what
the
deal
Department
was.
of Transportation level, the governor's level,
Governor's level.
the governor's level? So this was
And the the Department of
Secretary of
Transportation.
Transportation.
The T.
And is there an ulterior motive as to why this particular line was? It doesn't seem as a commuter line. It makes any sense. I mean, why are they focusing? Why are they rushing through a deal like that? If there's no, if there's no passenger service, it's going to be
As
utilized.
the politically incorrect one of our delegation, it doesn't seem to serve anybody but the Kraft Group. By having a train line and an express line right at Patriot Place, I think it's very, very beneficial for the Kraft Group and Bob Kraft, and for the property there, to be able to bring in a corporate headquarters or bring in high-priced condos or whatever, and have it be a direct line, especially from the standpoint of, they're not just adding it into the line, it's going to be an express rail. So, people in Walpole and, Norfolk and Norwood are going to take a longer train ride for this particular line to bypass them and go direct up. The entire thing, even with their projections, was that it was going to increase ridership by 100. I mean, they would say 500, but when you looked at their real numbers, 400 of those were pulling off of either Attleboro or Walpole lines.
Sure.
So it was really only a true increase of 100 riders, and it was going to operate at a loss of $9 million a year with an expense of over $300 million by the time they bought the trains. For that kind of
Stupid
rate of
things.
return, I could take those 100 people and drive them to Boston every day in a limo,
Yeah.
and we'd be far better off.
Right, I know that,
So
yeah.
so that's the only thing that from an outsider, unless there's some secret plan that I don't know of, the only thing that makes sense, and it doesn't pass the smell test, but the only thing from a common sense standpoint is that it was a present to the Kraft Group, from
Yeah,
the
from
outgoing
the
administration to allow for this.
If a tenth of what you're saying is fact,
And those
Why-
are the
why isn't-
Department of Transportation's
Yes.
numbers, not my numbers.
yes, why aren't the Boston press or the local press picking this up? It seems to me this is a hot story that should be reported. If there's something going on behind closed doors, why isn't the public entitled to know?
Maybe
I
it's
guess it's
also, might also fall back to the Kraft Group. I mean, that's, they're, a very popular, powerful, organization. I mean,
Yeah.
it's, it's a.
Maybe they need the light of a little sunshine in
Oh, I was gonna say, I'm a Brandeis
their
guy,
lives.
so I mean, sunlight's the best antiseptic, so I mean, I think that would be great if they did a little blurb about it, you know, back in, you know, November when this first came to light, and then it kind of died. So either the public didn't pick up on it, or it wasn't, you know, enticing enough. But there, you know, the local papers did a few things, the Sun Chronicle did a few things on it, but for the most part, there wasn't a whole lot of public outcry.
There's really no local papers anymore.
Right, and I think that has
We
a
had
lot to do with it, is that, you know, in the big scheme of things, you know,
We had when Patch started up here in Medfield, we had an excellent editor who worked very hard and made it very robust, and AOL eventually pulled the plug on Patch, and that excellent editor now works for the Kraft Group.
oh, there we go.
Well, even if they, I mean, the line they're looking at would be the Franklin line, and then it would go from Walpole into Foxborough. But the other part of that line that goes from Framingham on in, if they ever had to, I don't know where the passengers would be coming from, Worcester or Framingham,
Right.
but you'd have to do tremendous repairs on those tracks. And then the number of crossings, just in Medfield alone, you'd have to have security gates. I mean, if you're putting a high-speed train, I mean, you're talking astronomical sums of money here.
Alongside of schools, you know, in people's backyards, I mean, it is, you know, horrendous, you know, but, you know, that was the original plan when, you know, all these studies that I'm quoting came out from when the Kraft Group was originally proposing the casino, and that's when
Exactly,
the DOT
yes.
had all the studies. So that was an increase of 100 with the casino there. So without a casino there, who knows? But, you know, so I mean, that, you know, that was the plan, that it would eventually loop everything together from Framingham, you know, the Worcester line, cutting across Framingham, then coming down through Medfield into Foxborough.
Yeah.
And then it goes, I think it continues all the way over to Mansfield.
Mansfield.
So that
Connect to
it could
Providence.
eventually connect down to Providence.
Oh, okay.
I mean, in light of, and my wife takes the train out of Walpole every morning. I mean, granted, we've had record snows, but what an embarrassing state of affairs. And I don't think, for some reason, the Franklin line still is the last line. That's not completely on, but they cut the trains, the people were waiting, the overcrowding. Let's fix the existing system before we start buying new, you know, systems and expanding. You know, and they're talking about having the Olympics and stuff coming. It's an embarrassment if we can't run our trains in a snowstorm. How are we going to be, you know, being a world-class city out of Boston, getting the trains? You know, let's fix what we have before we start expanding.
They've been running poorly for 100 years.
Right.
And, you know, they weren't forward funded till 10 years ago. And even then, they have no interest, apparently, at least in my view, of government, being in state government off and on for 20 years and being in the Senate for 10. They have no, it's a conspiracy of ignorance or a culture of arrogance, how they run the operation. And they need the disaster and the emergency to be funded. And they have, somebody would say, well, that's government in general. And I'm like, yeah, in some respects, but around the same time, I bring up the story all the time, or bring up the example. The School Building Authority had the same problem in 2002 when they were created from the DOE, about an $8 billion problem of school construction costs that they hadn't paid back. They hadn't even audited one of the schools that they did through the 90s. And the T had the same. They called it Big Dig Debt. They're hiding behind expansion. Big Dig Debt is the Silver Line, it's the Courthouse T Station, it's a number of things. It's the Rose Kennedy Greenway. And the troubling thing is the School Building Authority now has paid back $10 billion. The Treasurer Grossman announced that last year. $10 billion they had paid back, and they're doing new construction and renovation. So they've still been able to do their job. The T is at square one still, has no interest in changing behavior, and they've been allowed to. And this is what you get. You get massive expansion, and then you have a core services that you can't through. I mean, obviously it was a record-setting snowfall, but it wasn't as if it was different than we've had in 95 or 96 or even some other years.
Right.
I mean, that was, they could deal with it. Everywhere else was able to deal with it with you know, 24, 48-hour shutdown, but they had trains that were leaving stations that couldn't get to the next station. That isn't the weather. That's mismanagement and malfeasance.
The other problem with the T that nobody wants to touch is the benefit packages. they have more retirees than they have employees. You can't survive an organization in that shape. Their reform, my understanding of their reform was, instead of being able to retire with a full pension after 23 years, you can retire with a full pension after 25 years. So you can still get people retiring in their 50s, in their 40s, 30s, or 20s if they get out on disability pensions. I mean, it's you know, the stories you hear about, you know, padding the payroll and putting on relatives. I don't know if that still goes on. I assume it still does. But, you know, until somebody's willing to face up to those problems, you can do all the reforms you want, but you can't have an organization that runs for the benefit of its employees at the expense of its consumers.
Yeah, I think to Senator Timmelty's earlier point was the citizens of the Commonwealth are very, very generous. You know, they're more than happy to help people and pay, but they don't want to be abused. They don't want to see their hard-earned money being wasted. They don't want to see, you know, they want to see, all right, if we're paying for something, we want to get our service, and we want to, you know, if the money's there, let's help out more people and let's have it go to the right people, as opposed to having, you know, the fraud, the waste, abuse, and just, you know, throwing good money after bad in certain departments that are not being accountable. And I think that's what the people really, really want, is the accountability.
Unfortunately, the way the system works, it's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, and we all know who squeals up on Beacon Hill. It's the lobbyist, and the average citizen is not represented. The T unions and the T employee groups and the T management groups are all up there day after day with their paid lobbyists, pushing for more and more and more at the expense of the taxpayers. And the taxpayers have got to stand up and say, we're mad as hell and we're not going to take it anymore. And until they do, they're going to get more of the same. Lousy service and very expensive service.
Yeah, 60% of your pay with free health care after 23 years, so you could retire in your 40s, is just an abject
the classic
failure fiscally.
Classic example is the head of the Mass Convention Center Authority. What's he getting? $350,000 plus he's getting something like $150,000 pension from the T, and he's probably his early 50s, mid 50s. And what happens? He gets $1.1 billion to expand a convention center that everybody says isn't needed.
But I mean, the whole transportation network, the T, is just so important to the economy of Massachusetts. The people of Medfield that ride out of Walpole, ride out of Norfolk, depend upon that. It's vital, and I don't know what the answer is, but it's key to our economy here in Massachusetts. We have a good system, and it's just not working.
Yeah.
So I think that we need to take a little bit of a breath here, because what you're seeing is, regardless of what the past is, this focus and this energy on how we're going to move forward with the T. I think every person in elected office and in the administration understands the importance of public transportation to the Commonwealth. It is the engine that gets workers to the jobs.
Well, yeah.
Everyone talks about jobs. We have to be able to get people there, and we have to be able to get people home. We are all anticipating the report from the special commission that the governor put together, which is actually due out any day now. I think we're going to see a lot of energy into those constructive things. I love that Jimmy used the, Senator Timmelty, used the great example of the MSBA. You know, the Commonwealth has grappled with terrible problems and has come up with good strategic solutions, and I am much more on the side that that's the work that lies ahead of us, and hope that these are the kind of stories we'll tell each other, you know, over coffee sometime, but that we have a much more positive, productive solution in store. And I would be remiss, I don't know what that solution is, and I don't think my delegation knows, but I know we're all committed to working on it.
I mean, I think there's some good ideas, and I hope it doesn't fall on my own. I know that late night service they had, I think is great for the city. And I know that's probably one of the first things going to be on the chopping blocks, but things like that are what the people need in the city, not the expansions to Foxborough and things like that.
well, in that exchange, you could see that clearly in the delegation, the voice of reason who keeps us too focused is the gentlelady from Needham. Very important. The leader of the delegation keeps us focused.
And to that end, I wanted to share too, I wanted to compliment everyone on the town meeting yesterday. And again, the people, the leadership of the town and the volunteer citizens, and how thorough that presentation was on the public safety building. And I had a chance briefly to speak with our delegation, and we share the overwhelming sympathy of the community for the Corrigan family. And we are going to look into legislation that would allow some kind of protection around these skylights. That is just a tragedy that, I am so sorry that happened, and we have to work hard to make sure that it doesn't happen again.
Can I get a couple of other things I think will fall in your, we're having an issue. I think you've seen in the past couple of years how downtown has become more vibrant. We've gotten more businesses, there's more people now in our downtown. And the offside of that is now we're beginning to look at issues with parking that are in the downtown area and I know Mike has mentioned the town owns a lot, not right behind Town Hall, but right next to it, of putting some kind of like a second level in there that probably would solve a lot of the problems. But is there the idea of state encouraging economic development? Are there funds or ways to help a community that wants to, build its downtown? So many communities, the downtown area has collapsed because of malls or other things that have driven the people out of the downtown. I think we're trying to do a real good job here in Medfield building the downtown up. And financially, it's a real hardship. It would be about $1 million plus, some estimates on that. Is there ways for economic development or somehow assistance from the state in some way to help communities that are trying to economically build up their downtowns and needs such as parking and other things such as that? Is there any direction you could give us or suggestions, or is that pie in the sky?
It'd be, if the delegation doesn't mind, it'd be, I attempted to engage the Department of Transportation a few years ago on a garage, transit-oriented development garage in Mansfield, and the town had appropriated $250,000 to study it, and I thought it would be a wonderful thing, and it really, it seemed, I was hoping to engage them, and I had Secretary of Transportation down checking it out, and it never, I think their focus was elsewhere. But with a new housing and economic development chief, it may be something that, that whether it be a John Adams Enterprise grant or some other, there are pots of money that are there that if in 1 year I checked the Adams Enterprise grant, I hope it would still be going. That there were 2 applications and 2 awards, and I know I had directed one of my chambers of commerce to go in that direction, and didn't have a grant writer, so they didn't really take it up on it. But it would be a long shot, but there's new energy in the administration, new secretary, and he could potentially be looking at that, and I think that's another area where the delegation will bring somebody down, Richard, to meet with you and maybe meet with MIMO to say, here's what we're working on, what we're looking at, and we could potentially, they could at least partner, or then find maybe some partners in the community who would want to work on that, because the town being willing to put up a certain amount, and then the state, and maybe even the private enterprise, something could come together, and we'd be more than happy. That's the fun stuff to work on, as opposed to complain about the team.
And the nice thing about Secretary Ash is he's a former town manager, so he gets it. So he at least understands. I'm sure Mike probably knows him, but he was at Chelsea for 13, 14 years as their town manager. So he at least understands how the town aspect works, as opposed to him coming from the outside and he has no idea on
Yeah.
So is that something, maybe we can just follow up, maybe you can give us some names?
Absolutely.
And I know Mike had mentioned maybe some ideas of trying to get the private sector involved
Yeah,
as
there-
well,
there's
because
some
they're the ones that benefit
Special
directly.
taxing districts, I think you can set up, but I think it requires the cooperation of the landowners that own the parcels, and you have to define who's benefiting from the district, so. But there are mechanisms like that, that if you get the cooperation of the business community, it can work, so.
Because we don't want to strangle on the success. I mean, we're building the town, and that clearly it looks as though that's going to be a major issue. The other issue, we have a great committee that studies Lyme disease, which Medfield is one of the higher communities because of the number of deer per square mile and the number of cases of Lyme disease we have in Medfield. And we've set up a program that's been very successful, where they do bow hunting of the deer, and they go through all sorts of safety checks and everything else. I mean, Frank Perry and that committee, they do just a tremendous job with that. But one of the things when they just came a couple of weeks ago, which I guess is on the state level, you cannot, I guess, and Pete, you can correct me, but they cannot hunt within 500 feet and they're looking to more realistically bring that down closer to like 150 feet. And
They
that,
actually said that there was a state study that said 150 feet was sufficient
Safety zone.
for bow
yeah.
The
hunting.
bow, yeah, because they,
Right.
And you can't shoot within 500 feet of a house, and so that 500-foot distance just creates huge areas in which
we can't.
no hunting can take place, no deer culling takes place.
If it was
and-
150, we'd be able to add an awful lot of additional acreage to include in the hunting with that.
yeah, and I think it has happened. The hunting bills come before the Public Safety Committee, and we've made, in years past, it's usually been an ask to move it to 1,000 feet.
Ah.
Which, yeah, that's usually where.
The other way?
The other way. It was going the other way, so we've been more rational on the bow, because I think the stories of people who have been caught with a stray bullet, rightfully
Oh, we're just talking bow.
scare
Yeah,
individuals.
we
But
only
for
have
the
a bow
bow,
program.
the ballistics of which, or whatever it is, and many of those are in tree stands and
Has
they're
to be in
going
tree
down.
stands, yeah.
That working with former Rep. George Peterson, who's at Fisheries and Wildlife, I think we can accomplish that, because we really do. I think everybody looks at the deer tick and the deer because of how many there are per square mile, but the deer ticks also travel on the rodents, the chipmunks and others. And if you have, say, 10 deer per square mile, just imagine how many chipmunks you have. So it's, it's certainly, it's a scourge. I remember going to my pediatrician with my daughters, and he had said in his, he was local, in 18 months of his last practice, he had seen more cases of Lyme disease than in 18 years of his prior service. So it is something, a very difficult diagnosis as well, but it's something that we have to work on. And as we always get some action items from this engaging board, and certainly from the town manager, we have Lyme disease, the garage, and then I'll handle the CSX issue.
Yeah, somebody
The
said
other-
the other night that Blue Hills is really having a problem with deer too. They're even gonna authorize bow hunts in there, which is very
Oh.
unusual, so.
Yeah, and Secretary Beaton, who was my former seatmate, is the new Secretary of Environmental, is an avid bow hunter, so I know he would be all over this.
Love it down to
Yeah,
50 feet,
That's all he talks about, is all season long, it's bow hunting, bow hunting.
The other part of the hunting that we need your help with is apparently hunting is banned on Sundays now. And if Sunday hunting is allowed, that most hunters then would have twice as many days a week to hunt, because most of them are people that are working, so.
In the bill that's before us, all they're looking for is 4 Sundays in December, and we've had trouble advancing that. Both issues have been within the committee, and I have tried in a rational approach. I wonder how. I'm sure we'll have some success in the House. I'm not sure that I'm persuasive enough to get it through the Mass Senate. There's not as many suburban legislators who have the appreciation for hunting areas and these issues. I don't know if we can do it through Commonwealth mass regulation, because MGL might be very tough on Sunday hunting, but we've tried.
Because we passed it last time in the House, right, and
Yeah.
then it failed in the Senate?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's, the committee's work has been very interesting from the standpoint that there are a lot of other damages that the deer do other than just the deer ticks. They basically are changing the forest.
Mm.
They're eating so much that there are other animals and birds that just don't live there anymore. I mean, we used to have ruffed grouse around, but you don't see those anymore. They're creating a sort of like a monoculture because they eat everything on the ground. And so that we're just changing our environment.
It's true clearly that in generations past, you would go out west looking for deer to deer hunt, and now those out west would be very easy. In Indian Estates, right across from my lot field in Walpole, there were 2 deer in a backyard at 5:30 this afternoon. So they're here because it's the subdivisions, and it's where people want. It's creating edge. The crabgrass frontier is creating a edge habitat that they thrive in, and it's not good for the herd. It's not good for the herd because there's too many.
Well, plus, we're running about 30, 35 deer that are hit by cars that are being demolished each year here in Medfield.
It's certainly public health and public safety.
Yeah. Anyhow,
Almost crisis.
we told the committee we would relay that onto you. They really do a very good job on that.
And Richard, they could engage me on some of those laws because I'm in some respects the committee that I chair I'm heavily involved in those areas. So they could reach out to me at the State House and we could continue the discussion further.
I hate to bring up this topic, but anything on snow, in terms of federal to state relief, or I understand.
We don't want any more.
Yes, lots of snow. Yes. So, but I think there's some legislation that's been proposed as a relief measure to extend the time of paying off snow deficits, extend it to somewhere from 2 to 5 years. I know the governor's applied for federal assistance, and we may be likely to get it for the first storm, but he's trying to get it for all 4 storms. And yeah, so I don't know if any of you have heard anything about any of those efforts.
So the idea that the towns can essentially amortize that debt has passed in the House for 2 years. There's a proposal in the Senate for 5 years. So I think it's reasonable for you as a Board of Selectmen to think that you've seen the floor and the ceiling of that, and you could start to plan around that, and that would help just as your budget planning. I know that the governor was talking a great deal about combining those 4 storms with the federal, with the FEMA relief, but we're not hearing that talk so much, so I'm beginning to get more concerned that they're not going to be able to combine that. I know that in the state legislature, we just voted $50 million for snow and ice removal at the state level, and that's only a portion of what we actually are looking at the state level as well. So
it's enormous. Yeah.
It's to be continued, I believe, and I'm sure it will resolve itself.
And then you've had so many people here that have had damage with ice dams and roof collapses and partial collapses, and it's just been horrendous. The only saving grace was that we didn't warm up too fast, and it's been a slow melt, so that really saved us a lot of additional. Yeah. So, well, if you hear anything else on that, appreciate it, because as we get near town meeting, we're trying to balance the budget, and that's one of our main stumbling blocks. So.
How much are you over?
I'd say we're getting close to 400,000 over. So.
And how much are you normally over? Because you can deficit spend that. So I mean,
last year our snow deficit was about 164,000. I think the year before it was around 150. So.
Okay, so substantially more than.
Yeah. I compared to some of the cities, it's not bad, but when you
Still, it's money,
but
though.
as a portion of our budget, it's
Right.
tough.
Big money, big chunk, yeah.
Well, all your towns must be facing that.
Oh,
I mean, Needham must be skyrocketed, and
it is, and it's heartbreaking.
Norfolk
I
and-
was saying to the town administrator, the snow will be gone, and we've got the debt, and we've got the house losses, and we've got the contractor costs, and all of that's still rolling in. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
And we get the pothole money, but we get,
Yeah,
that's
that
not
helps.
gonna come anywhere close to. That'll fill it with gravel, maybe. That's about it. So
Yeah,
there's,
yeah.
the roads out there are, as the snow melts, you just.
I used to kid, when my niece was living with me for a while, and she sprained her ankle one time, she said she sprained it in a pothole. I said, we don't have potholes in Medfield, and generally we don't. We have very few potholes, but even we're in tough shape this year. They're starting to pop up all over, so.
Anything else?
I just want to really thank you folks just for coming in. We do appreciate it, and we do want to also thank again, you know, for the great work you've done with us over the years and stuff like that. And last year was a terrific year, and just, you know, getting the state hospital put to bed and the water tower and stuff like that. Obviously, we couldn't do it without you, as we had expressed earlier, and it's really nice to have such a great relationship, working relationship with you guys. It really, it's a pleasure. It really is, you know. No, I was kidding.
Yeah, we actually didn't get a chance to, I think officially, just congratulate and thank you for your work with the hospital. I think because of snowstorms or whatnot.
Right, yeah, we were gonna have like a big signing. Remember, we were gonna have like a big thing, and it was like a lousy night or something like that. It was like last
I mean,
minute.
we were nervous, and
It's
you,
always time to celebrate.
Yeah,
you guys guided that through.
really.
It was nerve-wracking for a little bit there, and I know Denise kept saying, wait, be patient, we'll get it through, and we did.
yeah.
So that was good. Thank you.
But she, I was gonna say, that being said, she did, you know, I know Representative Garlick was running around making, you know, I'd be like, what else can I do? And I'm like, should I call this person? She's like, I already called him 3 times today. I'm like, all right, good, all right, you're on top of it. So it's, you know, she did a young share of the work in the house.
One,
And how's the committee, how's that whole process going?
Oh, they are
It's
so
excellent.
organized. They are,
got a
they've
great
got
group.
somebody writing minutes who's an engineer,
Oh,
and
good.
and there are,
Color coded and.
oh, it's just action items, assignments, and,
Yeah, very good. We're very
yeah,
fortunate,
it's just,
very, very fortunate.
in
the
the,
process is being driven
yes.
very well.
in
We're
the
just hiring
spring,
a planner to come on board and start the actual planning process.
in the spring, when they complete it, you ought to be sure to come out and take a look at the overlook and the boat ramp
Beautiful.
they're constructing out
Yeah,
there.
on the
They've
river.
done a
It'll be nice.
magnificent job, I think, in opening up the river. You know, I never knew the river was there. I mean, I sort of knew intuitively, but you couldn't see it.
See
Don't see it at all.
But they've created just a wonderful vista up along the river, and once they get it planted and seeded and landscaped, I think it's gonna be a
Can be a beautiful thing.
remarkable addition to the
Dramatic
town.
spot for the residents of the state.
Yeah.
I think this is a wonderful ending to this segment of your meeting. I wanted to say how fortunate both Representative Dooley and I are to work with Senator Timilty, our senior member, and
Pretty good guy. Yeah.
he's just a tremendous asset for us, and he shares credit, and he's just terrific. And we're doing very well. I think the 3 of us as a delegation bring you 3 different faces, 3 different voices.
Republicans and Democrats actually working together? It's like a shocking thing.
Representatives and senators
I know, that's right. That's even more shocking, yeah. It is a big deal, but no, really, I mean, because that's how it should be, right? I mean, that's how government should be.
Yes.
We'd like to think it that way.
And for the Commonwealth itself, you know, I do want to take this one moment and remind people, you know, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts ranks #1 in public education in the nation. Our 8th graders score higher than students anywhere else. Medfield itself is ranked number 17 in the Commonwealth, 351 cities and towns. Extraordinary job that Medfield is doing. We rank #1 in our veteran services. You start your meeting every single meeting with a moment thinking of the people who are serving and who have served. But we actually are doing the hard work that other states in this nation are not doing.
Yeah.
And we take good care of our veterans. We are actually the #1 life sciences center in the country now. Not Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
not anywhere in California. It's right here in Massachusetts. And we came out of the recession better than most states. I think we came out at the 3rd fastest rate coming out of the recession. So when we talk about the issues that we're struggling with, some of those are our own decisions we've made about, you know, how we're going to do taxes or not do taxes, and fees and not do fees. But I think that we have so much to be proud of, and
Yeah.
I don't think you can be more proud than when you attend a local town meeting
Yeah.
and see, last night, that gymnasium was full of people, open town meeting, people not committed because they had been elected to be there, but showing up
Yeah.
and caring. So, you know, I certainly am proud to be a representative of Medfield and the rest of my district, and I'm proud to be a citizen of Massachusetts,
Yeah.
and I hope we all carry that feeling.
Yeah.
We should have given you a vote last night. Because you've been in town so many days in a row, all of you
I'm
guys.
for it.
A couple of quick ways, you remind me on the Veteran Services. I did have an email from our Veterans Service Officer today, Ron Griffin, and about legislation that's been submitted, and I know I talked to you about it. It's in the very early stage, but it would consolidate the Veteran Services agents into 35 districts statewide, would eliminate the local Veteran Service officers. And it was a 16-page bill. I got through most of it, but
So, Mike, if I could just respond to that, and I'm sure Senator Timilty can back me up and probably give more examples, but we are at the beginning of a new legislative cycle that's 2 years. 3,600, more than that, Jim?
Oh, yeah, I think so, yeah.
Is it
We're
I think
probably,
with the Senate, it was close to
5,000? With the Senate bills, over 5,600 bills
Bills.
have been filed. Every single bill gets a public hearing. The bills that are the more creative seem to get more airtime. Because a bill has been filed doesn't mean that a bill is going to be passed. There's grave concern from many, many veterans agents about that bill that's been filed, and I'm sure that's going to be thoroughly vetted. On the House side, the chairman of the Veterans Services Committee is Jerry Paracella, who is an active Iraqi veteran, and we both have a very strong relationship with the Senate chair, who is Mike Rush of Veterans Affairs. So I know that we are only going to see the most thoughtful approaches. But because we're on television, it's worth saying, you know, why wake up in the morning at 5:30? And I'm listening to WBZ, they're talking about things that are going to come forward, and people believe that means it's coming forward for a vote. Most often, it's coming forward for a public hearing. And when we talk about the 13 steps it takes to pass a bill, the public hearing is step 3.
Yeah.
So I'm always concerned that people
Yeah.
think that something's going to happen. You know, I think the town administrator is right that we have to be heads up on everything that we hear about and be looking at it. But because we hear about it doesn't mean it's going to be a law.
I think a similar thing with that, and I know it's come up in the past, is the same concept with the housing authorities. There's a concept to take away the local housing authorities and have district ones. And I know the residents here in Medfield and the housing, because they know the local director, they know the local maintenance, and you would lose a lot of that. And there was a great concern on that. I know that has come up.
Yeah, that was up last time, I think.
Yeah, so there was concerns on that.
that didn't go anywhere, and
Yeah.
it's, I can understand the concept of regionalization, and there are places where it works, particularly in the public safety answering points, state 911, and regionalizing that, because, you know, New Hampshire has maybe 4 PSAPs, we have 231, so there's a better way to do that, and we've got a grant program and a path in order for that to happen. But the regionalization of certain services, I mean, imagine having your roads plowed out of Mass Highway in Taunton. I mean, that would be just horrible. So it looks good on a board, and the NAPC works on it, but any efforts at nonsensical regionalization for regionalization's sake does not work. And I think most everybody would admit that in terms of delivering veteran services, the Commonwealth is, like the representative said about education, we're first in the nation. And you would hear that from military people from around the country would tell you that Massachusetts is first in the way it delivers its veteran services, and it works very well with the local VSO and the Board of Selectmen, and there is not a lot of appetite to change that, I think, in the legislature, and I'd predict that, like the local housing authority, you won't have to worry about this one. Ron does not have to worry, does too good a job.
He does.
one last question, I'll shut
There's
up.
always something.
The Olympics, are the public gonna have any say on,
There's going to be a vote, November 2016,
there will be?
but this is
Statewide or Boston?
statewide.
Statewide.
Statewide referendum.
And Boston's
It's-
going to have a veto, they said.
I've never cheered against the country in the Olympics, and it will be the first because I'm cheering for us not to win the bid. I think it
agree.
would be very troubling. It would be billions of dollars that would be spent in the guise of future good things that would happen, but it would be for a 17-day party that some individuals would profit from, and the Commonwealth, in particular, as we saw, as Mike, you had to manage through it, the resources all went to the big dig. in a transportation sense, and we've never been able to recover from that. And once again, if you have a 10-year effort
Yeah.
to do that in 2024, there is no discipline in the Commonwealth, in the government, and they just cannot hold the line. You saw it time and time again. Something this massive, going into this massive dollar-wise and project-wise deal with the private sector, just like the Big Dig, we will lose. Outside of the airport traffic being a little bit better, more passengers going through, and some exits, and aesthetically, when you take a look, Bonnie Frank was right, it would have been less expensive
Raise the city.
to raise the city than to press the central artery. And it could, this will happen again. And I don't mean to be the bad guy who just harangues about the T and about massive deals with the private sector, but every single time the Commonwealth gets into a relationship like that, the Commonwealth loses. And in particular, the districts that this delegation represent, we will see next to nothing from that, and then the generations that go beyond us, because we're now wrestling with that amorphous Big Dig debt, which is the Greenway, Silver Line, Courthouse T Station, and Green Line expansion that we haven't cleared off the books. And I could only see that happening again. And I think, I understand that some people could be swayed and want that because of the prestige, but every other city that's done it, with the exception of maybe Barcelona, has really not only lost, but lost big. Sochi, Sarajevo, it's the list
London,
goes on and on. And we don't have the wherewithal. We're not even at a position where we can entertain that with all the needs, infrastructure and otherwise, that we have. And the fact that the past administration is now working on this effort is troubling, because it's not a year out. I thought the cooling off period for many was a year, but that revolving door it seems to be spinning and spinning fast.
Yeah.
I'm afraid all the money would be spent in Boston and Cambridge, but the bills would be sent to the suburbs.
Yeah.
Expect sort of the Special Olympic train line running right through the middle of Medfield.
Yeah.
Going to Foxborough.
To get to
Station.
Foxborough.
There you go, yeah, you're right, though.
Imagine
You're
if
right.
you live in Hampden County,
Yeah,
Hampden, New Hampshire, or Franklin
Franklin
County,
County,
and you think of the penny on the sales tax.
Right.
900 million a year goes right to the MBTA.
right.
900 million goes right to the School Building Authority, 900 million goes right to the MBTA. One is doing a tremendous job in
Yeah.
serving the Commonwealth, and the other is an Eastern Mass boondoggle.
Yeah.
On that note,
Thank you guys so much for
Thank you.
coming.
Thanks for coming, that was great, thank you.
30 days to,
You're starting to sound
30 days
like
to
me.
opening day.
Yeah.
One sunny and rosy thing.
I hear we got a good team. Next, we have Reverend Jonathan Chichilli, First Baptist Church, to discuss proposed community cleanup day. Greetings. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me. I can't begin to compare to these guys. These guys know their stuff backwards and forwards. I've talked about this a little bit with Richard and Pete, so I'm gonna recap and dive in from the
Yeah.
beginning.
Great. Thank you.
Last year, I initially bounced this idea off Richard, and it just didn't come together. The idea basically is to find, depending on volunteers and the volunteers we can gather, anywhere from 1 to 4 or 5 of the public spaces in the community that need to be cleaned up. It's been an incredibly tough winter. From my understanding is the budgets are already shot, and every dollar that you can save would be, that would help the community. It would help, and plus it'd be fun. It'd be fun to gather in people. So the idea is to find some of the community spaces, be it the town park or even secondary places like the Derby, White Derby House, and do raking, do cleaning, whatever needs to be done. And in part, I'm here today to say, what is the best places to be aiming myself? What do you need most? I can come up with a list. You probably know exactly what will need to be done, or more likely, we will all know better once the snow melts and we can see what's underneath the pack. I was over at Parks and Recs today, and I spoke with Brian, and that was kind of his assessment, was we'll be able to get a good feel after the snow melts away. So that's my idea in a nutshell. My thought process is we have Cub Scouts at First Baptist that meet, so I know some of the people with the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts. Mark Eames and I are already kind of have banded together and have started. We've had one sit-down meeting to kind of say, you know, what is the scope? We're thinking smaller and tighter, at least in the first year. You know, do 2 or 3. Initially, I thought, well, maybe we could get a list of seniors that need stuff, and after thinking it through, we're like, let's try to keep it small and tight. But work with the high school kids too. There's always high school kids that need community service hours, especially if they're in the honors programs. And then after, have a community celebration, you know, get everybody that's worked and served together, have a cookout, and just say thank you to them.
Sure.
So.
I think we can certainly come up with a list of sites for you, and I think probably you want to organize, maybe get a team captain for each of the sites, so you have someone to coordinate with Public Works on pickup of trash, and, you know, they'll be glad to send trucks up or supply plastic bags or whatever to help, you know, with the cleanup, and provide, you know, equipment, you know, if you need rakes or shovels or whatever, that sort of thing.
One of the thought processes was that we would create a website, and everybody, as they volunteered, you know, what can you bring along with you?
Yeah.
So we can kind of create a database of, we know what you can do to, you know, to help. You know, we can get your age, so we can know kind of, you know, an 8-year-old can do this, you know, a 25-year-old can do a lot different stuff.
Yeah.
So that was part of my thought process.
If it helped, if as Mike said, if we come up with some suggestions of either park and rec town or school areas, and then maybe coordinated with the highway department to help pick up bags or things that you would need for that, so we can kind of work together with you, with the town to assist. Is that
Sure.
is that reasonable for?
Yep.
Okay. I had a couple other questions, in terms of putting things together. Is there permitting that we will need? Or would this
I
not?
think the selectmen can just approve of it as a vote to authorize you to proceed with it. That's no formal permit. That,
All right.
So that's fine, yeah.
That was kind of one thing, and then I'm assuming we'll need to get a rider on one of the church's insurance policies just to cover stuff like that.
yeah, or we might be able to cover it under, we have a volunteer policy on our insurance, so I'll check and see if that's, you know, would cover us. So you probably, if you're dealing with scouts and that, you probably want to stay off the public ways and stay on sites that are safer for them to, you know, thinking things like the swim pond or, you know,
Meeting
Tilden
house,
Village, maybe something like that, or, yeah.
Away from the streets, yeah.
Away from
Yeah,
the
straight
streets
from
was
the
our
streets,
thought
yeah.
process.
Yeah.
Hinkley Park is probably, according to Brian over at Parks and Recs, probably already going to be done by the beginning of May. We were looking at May
Okay.
2nd as a possible date.
Mhm.
And he thought that Hinkley Park and Metacomet will probably be taken care of by then.
Yeah.
Just because
Taking all the.
I don't know with the cemetery. Now, the cemetery frequently does clean up for Memorial Day, which is the end of the month. There might be some areas in there that
Yeah.
might be,
yeah.
Could be
We
good.
you got
Addressable.
Meeting House, Baxter, the library
Library, yeah.
area across the way,
Yeah.
yeah.
school areas.
School areas, you certainly take a look at McCarthy Park, maybe something like that. I
Yeah.
know that
Yeah.
Brian would
Oh,
work
yeah,
on that,
Matthew
yeah.
Park would be a good
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Or Metacomet Park, you know.
Metacomet, he said, would probably be done.
Oh,
Those two
okay.
would,
Yeah, we
those
could-
were the two highest priorities. I
priorities that they
mentioned.
would
Yeah.
they were jumping on, yeah.
Yeah, wherever the kids go fastest.
Okay, well, we'll start
Yeah.
scouting around
Yeah,
and
we're gonna
checking
keep
with.
going on that.
So, Dan, one of my favorite observations of my life was, my office is in Newton, so I'm driving from Medfield to Newton all the time. And one year, just before the marathon, I was commuting through Wellesley and Newton, And as I went through Wellesley, I noticed that they had out these street sweepers with the circulating brooms on the front, and that's how they were cleaning up the marathon course. And then I got to Newton, and Newton had out dozens of people with rakes on the Commonwealth Avenue where they have the broad boulevard, and I thought, oh, well, there's a difference, you know. And so I thought to myself, always good to have good tools.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that the DPW might be able to assist you with is that they've got good tools. I mean, I think they've got actually one of those sweepers with the brush on the front that goes around.
Yeah.
And when they clean up after Medfield Day, they come in with these blower packs, and they just, I mean, they clean up after Medfield Day in a matter of an hour or two. It's just astonishing how quickly they can just clean up. And so having the right equipment is very helpful, so that we might be able to help you with some arrangements about getting access to the right equipment.
How would he do that? Would he work through Ken or through, what's the best avenue, Bobby or?
I'd probably work through Bobby, and Ken,
You know Bobby
either one,
Kennedy?
Yes, Bobby
We'll put you
Jr.,
in touch.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I
Touch,
do.
yeah.
I know I've met Ken Feeney.
Yeah.
We did a kind of an appreciation dinner a few years ago for the DPW, the highway workers. So I know I've met Ken.
We'll contact you with Bobby as a contact person. And do you have a name for your group?
We do. God loves Medfield, you know, and the thought process is, as a group, we're just trying to show God's love to the community. You know, the Bible tells us to seek the peace and prosperity of our city, and this is our hometown. This is the place that we live, and we want to bless it and bring it good. Kind of my aims are, in addition to doing cleanup, you know, we've got the 2 Medfields. You've got some of the older communities that don't understand the younger community, and vice versa. And I'm hoping that we can bring them together to serve alongside of each other, because that's something I've run into again and again, and I feel like it's one of the weaknesses in a great place. So I'm hoping to do a little healing there.
Well, then I move that we give, is it permission or?
Permission or support, yeah.
Permission or support to Jonathan's group for the cleanup efforts, and that we'll have our DPW assist
Coordinate,
as they can.
Excellent. I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
Aye. That's good. Excellent. Good.
So maybe
Thanks
if
for doing
you, do you want to maybe contact Mike and he can put you in touch with Bobby? Is that the
Sure,
best
yeah,
way?
just give me a call anytime,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll reach out tomorrow.
great.
And May 2nd is a Saturday, is it?
May 2nd is a Saturday.
Good.
It's not, I think Earth Day's the week before, so that's kind of also in that planning process.
Good.
But it's a weekday, and that's just, you're not going to do anything on a weekday.
No.
Well, thank you for getting this off the ground. I know
Thank you.
Pete has talked about cleanup days for a long time, so
This is good.
you have the engine to get us going here, so thank you.
You're welcome. Thank
Thanks.
you.
Yep, take care.
Take care. Nice to meet you. Under our action calendar, we've got Jean Minio requests permission to hold an artist reception on May 16 for the Thistles project at the State Hospital site.
Is there anyone in particular she wanted, or just general?
I don't know.
It's just general, and this actually went to the Building and Grounds Committee that met last week, and they have actually approved this. They are recommending its approval, and they would like you to approve it.
Oh, good. Excellent.
I move that we support the Building and Ground Committee's request to allow Jean Minio to hold the artist reception on May 16th at the State Hospital site.
For the general public, could you explain what Thistle Day is?
Jean has undertaken a project where she had, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. She's undertaken an art project where she has got local groups to sponsor, and they're actually creating these to go around the public spaces and the trees up at the State Hospital.
Yeah. Very nice.
So-
public making public art,
Right.
which I think is really cool.
That's good.
You like plastic fit around the trunk, the branches?
That they're gonna be around the tree.
Trunks.
They're all bright pink. It's actually a very simple design. It's like a plastic fencing, and we weave cable ties in that make it stick out, and so it looks like a thistle.
Okay.
So there's 42 trees that have been identified
Excellent.
around the site. I mean,
Good.
and Girl Scouts are making it. If there's actually one over the library. There's gonna be a couple more public events at the library. for people to come out.
Good.
In May.
Did they steal the idea from you guys with your knitted tree?
Oh, with our knitted tree, no. No, actually, this is from an artist in Maynard.
Okay.
And who has also not only done a public consultation in Maynard, but in Worcester. And so somebody that
Good.
Gene had seen.
Every time I walk by that tree this morning, I thought how lucky it is.
That was a little
Nice
tree.
little warm.
Was quite nice and warm.
Good.
Yeah, no, my husband stole that idea off the internet.
Yeah. So I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have, let's see, appeal of decision of the Medfield Historic District Commission. And this is where the Medfield Historic District Commission imposed a demolition delay for 18 months on a property on Metacomet. And the homeowner or the person who's buying the house is
Appealing to us?
appealing to us, I guess. And so that we'll have to have a hearing on that, will we, Mike?
Yes, yeah, I can schedule it your
Okay.
convenience, probably a couple of weeks.
Okay.
Okay, that'd be good.
And lastly, a vote to authorize me as chair to execute Mass DOT standard contract form pertaining to the Winter Recovery Assistance Program, the RAP, and that's where we're getting $59,000 for pothole fixing.
Right, that money has to be expended by June 30th, and the invoices have to be submitted to the state by, I believe it's July 31st, or you lose the money. So Ken is gonna use it for crack filling. He doesn't think there's time to get out bids and whatnot for stone sealing, so he'll probably use it for crack filling and other pothole repair and whatnot.
There'll be plenty. I'm sure there'll be plenty.
Yeah.
So I was learning more about filling potholes recently, and I heard the commentator say that doing cold seals,
Cold patch?
cold patch, is worthless, and that you need a hot box, do they call it? Do we have a hot box?
You know, to be honest with you, I don't know.
Yeah.
I know they used to use cold patch all the time because the asphalt plant shut down in the winter.
Yeah.
Right.
But now I understand there's one asphalt plant that continues to process asphalt.
Well, and
year
I've
round.
noticed the different DPWs out with, actually, it looks like they got propane or
And
torches
heated up a
working
little,
on it.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what's
The
going
cold
on.
patch, although it may not be a long-term solution, sometimes for a temporary solution.
You gotta have it, yeah.
You wanna let the frost entirely come out of the ground before you make permanent pothole repairs. So sometimes the patch will prevent damage to cars, you know, where you can get a problem with cars hitting the potholes and bending
Oh, yeah.
a rim or, you know, whatnot. So if you can do something temporary, even if it does come out eventually. it
Yeah,
might be worth
I've
it.
seen around town, they've been filling in. I mean, there was some on South Street that are horrendous that have been filled in now.
Yeah.
If you can, the bottom of Norwood Road, though, is horrible. I mean, huge
Yeah.
potholes, if they can make note of that.
Yeah.
That's really bad on
Talk to
Norwood Road.
Bobby and have them get some people down there, so. And it's gonna get worse, because the frost is
Yeah.
just starting
It's,
to come
yeah,
out of the
yeah,
ground.
this is the time when everything's really bad.
Yeah.
Well, I move then that we authorize Chairman Peterson to execute the Mass DOT standard contract form pertaining to the Winter Recovery Assistance Program, i.e. the pothole fund.
I will second that.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Yep.
It's confusing. A few years ago, pothole money for schools.
Is that right?
They had a pothole program to help with special ed education on cost overrun,
Oh, yeah.
and they called it the pothole fund. So,
Oh, I thought you were doing a play on words.
yes, it's come back home wherever it belongs.
So that's the end of our agenda. I'll just hand out to each of you guys some material about the mission statement for the Economic Development Committee, because I went back a month or two ago and tried to figure out what their mission statement was, and what I discovered was that I couldn't find anywhere in the minutes that we'd ever voted on the mission statement, and that Mike had done an original draft, and then Richard had done a draft, and I had done a draft, and so I think that we should probably take a look at that and
Okay.
figure out what we're really asking them to do.
Sure.
The Economic Development Committee is requesting, we'll have it on the agenda for your next meeting,
Okay.
determination from the selectmen as to which direction they would like to pursue, we would like them to pursue in terms of Lot 3.
Yep.
Good. Okay.
Excellent.
Okay, just before we do adjourn, just to thank the people that went to town meeting last night. And just to remind everybody that on the issue of the public safety building, the town meeting was just phase 1 of 2 phases, that next Monday, the 30th, at the center on Ice House Road from 6 in the morning to 8 p.m., the polls are open, and you have a ballot question, and that has to pass by majority vote, or the public safety building will not be constructed.
Will not be built.
So just because it passed at town meeting is just the first step of 2. I just want to make sure everybody realizes that, and they have from, again, 6 in the morning to 8 in the evening at the senior center. In addition, we have the annual town elections.
We do.
That are taking place, and we do have a contested race in the area of the school committee. Two, as the moderator said last night, 2 great candidates, Jerry Potts and Mary Ann Sullivan, running for school committee. So please, I say a lot, democracy is not a spectator sport. Please take that second, go down and vote.
Excellent. Thank you.
And then I would just remind Mike that we need to get the annual calendar that we're working off of cranked up and going. So the next time, maybe we can have that. And
Sloughing
I
off.
think we're adjourned then. Thank you.
I'm Roberta Lynch, and you're watching Medfield.tv.